welcome back to All About the Game podcast. We're joined now by a World Series champion. Last year was the first base coach with the 2019 Washington Nationals, Tim Bogar. Thanks for joining us, Tim. Appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Todd. I'm really looking forward to talking some baseball. I miss it.
So just a little history on you. Your first game at the major league level was on April 21st, 1993. You had the opportunity to play with three different teams, with the Mets, the Astros, the Dodgers, and playing your last game on July 1st, 2001. You went on to manage and then also be an executive in baseball operations before joining Dave Martinez in 2018 with the Nationals. So awesome career. Congratulations on everything you've achieved so far, and just looking forward to seeing where else you go and, with this and how far it can take you. So it's just been a fun journey to watch. But you and Mike knew each other. So, Mike, maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. What's up, Bogey? Good to see you. Good to hear your voice. I know we're all looking forward to getting cranked back up here pretty soon. What's that been like for you guys right now, especially, you're in spring training, you get cut off a little bit, you get sent home, and now you're just kind of like, everybody's in this hiatus. How's it been for you, communication with you and Davey? How are some of that things rolling there?
Well, I think in a situation for everybody, obviously nobody's ever gone through this before. As you said, we were in the midst of getting ready for the season. We were only a couple weeks away, and then bam, we're done. But going forward, we decided let's try to stay in contact with all the players, keep them as close as possible in case this thing kind of gets cleaned up and baseball gets back to work. So Davey and I talk quite a bit. We're trying to stay on top of, what would happen when we come back, like what our workouts will be like, how we're going to, get the team stuff done because of all this separation stuff that people are talking about. But not only that, but making sure that the players are ready to go and not get injured when we first get back. That's the biggest thing is, been laid off for so long and then, trying to fire this up in 3 weeks. So, we as coaches,
it's the pitching, I think, that you kind of would concern yourself with. I think position players can probably get ready a lot quicker, but, just getting the arms stretched out would be probably the biggest concern.
Yeah, it is actually. Our pitchers at Max had a big meeting right before they all left, and a lot of them stayed in Florida for a while and just tried to stay in shape, and they were throwing 2-3 bullpens a week. Just to kind of do it, but they've kind of backed off. And then, like you said, now to regenerate it all and get it going, it's gonna be different. If we get back to playing, you're not going to see the starters go out there and go 6-7 innings to start with. I don't think. I think you're going to see the shorter stuff and a lot more bullpen arms.
Absolutely. So we go back a little ways. We met when I was with the Angels. And I remember that phone call, that interesting phone call that I got. This is kind of, Todd, you'll enjoy this. This is kind of a funny little story or whatever, but I get a call from the farm director. I was the field coordinator at the time, and we're going to hire Tim Bogar to be our AA manager. So the first thought that goes through my mind is Bogey's sitting there. He's been in the big leagues for a long time. He's the bench coach of the Boston Red Sox, and now he's coming and he's going to manage the AA team. I'm sitting there as the field coordinator, and I'm like, maybe I should manage the AA team, and Bogey should actually be the field coordinator because this doesn't seem right. But we were encouraged to have a little bit of a conversation. So I get on the phone. I'm trying to explain like what the regiment would be like in spring training and what we're going to try and do with our infielders. And Bogey not only is going to manage the team, but he's going to be in charge of our infielders and kind of the work that they're going to do every day. So explaining this process of like how I kind of want things to be done there. And he's asking questions and he's trying to comprehend what's going on. And it's kind of a little bit of a complicated process of what we were going to try and do or whatever. So I do remember hanging up the phone and turning to my wife and being like, man, this guy must be an idiot because this isn't that hard to follow. And Bogey tells the story. He hangs up the phone and says, this guy's an idiot. What is he trying to do?
Yeah, I remember that conversation vividly. And, you know, it was getting back to the development side of it and handling, you know, 30 guys at a time. I wasn't used to that. And, hearing how Cooch wanted to do it, I'm like, there is no way it's going to work. But we got it done, and, you know, it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, it did work out pretty well. So, but that was a interesting year. You had a really good team. You had a lot of prospects on that team. A lot of our conversations, I enjoyed a lot of our conversations. We then moved over to Seattle together, and you were on the big league staff, and I was in charge of kind of the minor league development going on down there. And I've always enjoyed our relationships, the conversations behind the scenes that you have about players. That we've always talked about how to develop players, how to get the most out of big leaguers. I learned a lot from how to talk to big league players, how to interact with them. Which kind of brings me to my next point. You know, you win the World Series, but that year really was a tough year. It started out, there's a lot of negativity kind of swirling. Obviously, we know what the media is like, and you know, the team's not playing up to their capability. You know, what's going to happen with Davey, what's going on with the team, and there's all these things. How did you guys keep the club together? We were talking a little bit about this earlier. We feel like that what an interesting dynamic a major league clubhouse is. I think it's probably one of the most interesting in all of sports, just because there's a lot of turnover in a major league clubhouse. There's a ton of access. You play more games than any other sport, and it's really hard to kind of like keep your walls confined and keep the club together. So just talk a little bit about, you know, how you and Davey and the staff did that.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing everybody realizes is in a major league clubhouse, it takes on the persona of the leaders of the team. And Davey, it goes back to when he was hired. You know, he's such a positive guy. Everything that comes out of his mouth is moving forward. Let's not, you know, think about the past. Do what's best for the guy next to you, not about yourself. It was those kind of messages, and you kind of see it as, you know, when we went through the series and all our little mantras, you know, 1-0 and stay in the fight and all that stuff. But it all went back to the day he got hired, and it was about making sure that the player did what they had to do to be successful, and it was our job to make sure that it stayed positive. So having all that turnover in the clubhouse, you know, is one of those things that we deal with, the personalities, the changes. But when the manager stays the same, the players take on his persona. And Davey never changed from the day he was hired through the last game of the World Series. I believe that he not only did that really well, but he got us as a coaching staff to do it as well. The players bought into it. And then he allowed them to be themselves. And you know, you hear about all these great teams that go on and win World Series. I know one of them was in Boston. They called them the idiots and all that stuff. Our guys were just as bad. Just as bad. We had a bunch of idiots, but they loved each other and they did what they had to do. But to your question, basically for me, keeping the unit together, understanding where we're going, and when anybody new comes into that clubhouse, you either buy into our culture or we're just going to move on from you. And that's exactly what happened in Washington last year when we went through those struggles in 1931 and things were going down and we got told we had 3 days till we were getting fired. And, you know, Davey said, don't change a thing. We're doing exactly what we're supposed to do. Let's get healthy. Let's just keep it on the tracks. And guys are going to turn it around because we had too many veteran presence in there to make it go away, and that's what happened, and obviously it turned out good at the end.
Yeah, that was a great run.
It's really interesting, you know, being around the game for as long as what we have, and being players, and then going into some form of player, you know, operations, scouting, executive, front office piece. You get an opportunity to see things that you never even imagined as a player went on. I mean, as a player, you're constantly thinking, why is this guy getting moved up, or why are they making these decisions? So it's interesting to hear the back end of how decisions are made, but then more how the culture is created. And I remember being a part of, as a kid, when my dad won the World Series in 1979 with the iconic team of We Are Family, with Willie Stargell and Dave, just all these great players, and Bill Robinson and Dave Parker. And what Chuck Tanner did so well was he allowed those players to build this community of brotherhood amongst themselves, and they went out and won it for themselves and each other. And it was that We Are Family team. And then in '87, when my dad won the series with the Twins, and you had the Kirby Pucketts and Bernanskis and Kent Herbecks, I mean, it was that same deal. Tom Kelly as a manager, he supplied the team with this culture. We had WWF wrestlers coming in the clubhouse, and they were slamming Herbeck, and they were they were the original Bash Brothers. It was fun. And I mean, I just remember as a kid, as a fan, looking up to these uncles and brothers of mine and saying, those 2 years, I think, were just amazing. And then being a scout with the Angels, 2002, and helping build, that team, it was that same, play on how the culture's created. So it's really interesting to listen to you talk about how, you guys did that with Washington, especially with, Harper being gone and different things like that. So.
Yeah, so like Davey and Riz did a unbelievable thing by bringing in Gerardo Parra. It was like the last ingredient to make the gumbo taste good. When you're making something, you got to have that special ingredient. And Parra came in and did exactly what you were talking about. Obviously everybody knows about Baby Shark, and that was his walk-up song, and it ends up getting on our World Series ring. But for me, that kind of just symbolized what our clubhouse was. It was fun. It was a bunch of guys that were pulling in the same direction. And you talking about the WWF stuff. I mean, that kind of stuff was going on in our clubhouse too. And there's a lot of it I can't share,
Yeah.
but there's a lot that the guys were doing. We had Congo lines, we had the whistles from the Dominican players going on after every game. Strasburg, great guy, kind of an introvert. He didn't like to socialize with a lot of people, but by the end of the year, he was the one leading it all. And he's dressed up in a Rocky gown, and he's jumping around with boxing gloves and stuff like that. So there was a really cool stuff that went on, and this group just became a band of brothers. And I'm telling you, right, people talk about, you got to have great talent, you got to have the analytics, you got to have it all work out. The breaks got to go your way. But if you don't have that clubhouse chemistry, and you don't have that thing where everybody pulling in the same direction, it's tough to win, especially at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. And the adversity that was created in the beginning of the year helps build the character of the group, and they can deal with things. Because you talk about now you're getting into the playoffs, and you've just had this unbelievable run all the way through. And I can remember it like it was yesterday, and here it comes all starting again. The Nats never won a playoff series. The Nats never done this. They never did that, whatever. So it's just, to understand that it's all about the family and you guys in the clubhouse, and just go out there and take care of business. That adversity really helps build the club.
It really does. When we were down, I've heard interviews with Zinn and with some of the other stars talking about how we went about it and why it got turned around. And we can talk about what the manager and the coaches did by keeping the atmosphere loose and positive. But those players decided that, what, we are good, and we're gonna do the things we've been gifted to do. Show up every day and give it our best, and at the end of the night, walk away with our tanks empty. And there's a lot of credit that goes to those players, especially most guys when they're 19 and 31 or however got, just kind of go through their days, collect the paycheck, move on. Our group didn't do that. I think it had a lot to do with the veteran guys like Howie and Max, and like, we're too good to throw this thing away. And, luckily things went our way. We got some bounces, and you know what? Everybody knows that the more adversity you go through, the stronger you get. And we went through a boatload of adversity, especially even through the playoffs. I mean, we won 5 elimination games. We should have never beat the Brewers. We should have never beat the Dodgers. We actually should have never beat the Astros. But every game in the 7th inning, we were the best team. And from that inning on, nobody could beat us. And that's what we believed in.
Why you play the games, right? You can draw it up on paper all day long, and this team looks the best and that team looks the best, but it's a team that goes out and performs and gets in. And it's the beauty of our sport. It's why the fans love it so much, and you go out there and anybody can win on any given day. But what an awesome run for you guys. A really very exciting baseball games, exciting atmosphere in the stadiums, and interesting. Every road game you won. No team won in their home state. That was I found to be very interesting as well.
Yeah, that's the most impressive thing, is going out and winning all the road games, especially. You're down 3-2 after they went to our place and swept us. You're not supposed to win 2 games in the other team's, stadium when the World Series is on the line. All they need is 1 game. And,
yeah.
Luckily we were blessed with Strauss, and we were blessed with Scherzer, and Randone came through, and Howie came through. Our stars elevated, and it was really good. If you allow me, I want to share a real quick story with you about that, supposedly being the best team and gonna win a World Series at the beginning of the season on paper. My rookie year in 1993, I was with the New York Mets, and our lineup was unbelievable. We had Hall of Famers in it. We had, Eddie Murray at first base, and Bobby Bonilla, and Howard Johnson, and Vince Coleman, Tony Fernandez, Jeff Kent, Todd Hundley. Our starting pitching was unbelievable. Brett Saberhagen, Doc Gooden. Remember the old name, Frank Tanana was still pitching back then, and Sid Fernandez, Johnny Frank, closer. How many games was that team supposed to win?
Yeah.
But through the season, we weren't together. We weren't a group. We were playing individually. There was 25 cabs going in 25 different directions at the end of the season, or at the end of the game. And, we ended up 59 and 103, and we were picked to win the World Series,
Wow.
So to your point, Mike, it's one of those things where, you can't just put the paper out there. You can't just write it down and say this team's going to win, because baseball is a special thing, and that's why we play 9 innings, and we got to get 27 outs, and what a wonderful game it is.
And it's a great story, and you talk about how it's 9 innings, and it comes down to sometimes, almost always, that last out or that last inning. But you brought something up with dealing with adversity and going through those challenges to just kind of become great. I remember when I was a scout and Steven Strasburg was in high school, there were people that doubted his talent and would literally tell the scouts, like, I don't understand why you're here. I'm not seeing what you're seeing. These are people that knew him, but he went over to San Diego State with Tony Gwynn, and whatever Tony Gwynn did with him was unbelievable. Justin Masterson was there in that same time period. I think Mass was a year behind Strasburg, or a year ahead. I can't remember, but those guys rose to it, and they started believing in themselves. And you look at today's athletes and just the messages that are there. That you don't always have to be the greatest player when you're younger, but when you really start believing in yourself and the game, and you get those people around you that give you the tools to boost that confidence up, look what you could do. You could be a World Series champion.
Exactly. You know, what's cool about it is, and I think you touched on it, Todd, is people don't understand how tough scouting is. To look at a high school kid like Steven Strasberg, who is probably, his body was unbelievable, but he mentally hadn't clicked it in yet, and been able to get his body parts to work right and do the right things.
Right.
But a scout sits there every day, and you guys watch what they do and how they about their business. You know, you try to figure out what they're going to be 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the road. And you know, it's one of those things for me in baseball that is very disappointing to me, that baseball is going away from the scouting side of it. You know, we're blessed in Washington that our GM is based as a scout, and he surrounds himself with a lot of scouts. And believe me, I'm not saying that analytics and all that stuff is a bad thing. I think it's very important. You got to blend it all together. But for people just to say that the scouting side of it is you know, it's not worth it, that it's a waste of money or time, I find that a very offensive thing, actually. And I feel like, you know, to your point about these young kids trying to figure it out, you know, you got to give them time. You got to give them an idea. They've got to be around people that might just make it click. You never know when that's going to happen. And I just want to, you know, say that I think scouting is the hardest thing to do in baseball. I really do.
Bogey, we were talking before the show today about the development side of things, and you know, the scouting is usually the backbone of a good organization, because you got to have the right ingredients, right? They got to go out and get the players, but it's so hard. I see it in the private sector now, you know, high school coaches telling kids that they can't play a certain position. They can't do this, they can't do that, or whatever. And just, you never know, you know, everybody matures at a different rate, you know, both physically and mentally. You know, some guys, you know, they click earlier, like you said. You know, somebody runs across somebody, they say it a little bit different, they kind of get through, and all of a sudden it starts to make sense. And then here comes the talent, you know, and it comes pouring out of them. So it's fun. Those guys that have been, you know, scouting for a long time, they kind of know what they're looking at. They can kind of pull the diamonds out of the rough a lot when they go in there, and they, you know, they see the right body, they see the right arm action, they see how the ball jumps. So
I remember when I went through the Major League Baseball Scouting Bureau, my first game, we're in instructional ball, and we're watching the White Sox, and Greg Norton was hitting. He went down to just get some extra ABs, and I think he was just working on trying to hit the ball the other way a little bit more. And I'm sitting there, and I've got this veteran scout, polyester pants, cowboy hat, you know, cowboy shirt, and he's sitting there with his old stopwatch, and we're watching Norton hit. And I played with Norton in college, and so he gets a base hit, and so the scout says, "Well, what'd you see?" And I said, "God, beautiful swing. I mean, obviously he's, you know, he's a big leaguer, and you could see he's working away. He hit the ball away, and he goes, "Well, what else did you see?" And so he starts breaking all these things down, and I'm like, by the end of it, I go, "Man, I don't know anything about baseball." A wise man. But there's a, you know, and as you go through, I mean, I scouted for eight and a half years. You know, I was really fortunate, drafted guys like Troy Tulowitzki and others that got to the big league level. But there's a certain play that a scout has, or a certain role where they can go and identify key areas within the swing that could potentially break down, or those tangibles of, like, the kid has heart. He can play. He's got savviness. He knows where to be in certain positions that analytics can't provide. But I also am a fan of analytics too. So it'll be interesting to see where this game goes in the next couple of years with this. But yeah, it's
yeah, for sure. And I remember, Cooch, maybe you can jump on this a little bit too. But when I was managing a Double-A for you with the Angels, you know, one of my outfielders was Randall Grichuk in Double-A. You know, in the backstory a little bit, and you could probably clean this up, Cooch, but, you know, he was drafted the same year as Mike Trout. You know, it was kind of one of those things where who is better, him or Trout? And I ended up with him in Double-A, and he, you know, he had all the talent, he had all the things going on. And, he just wasn't hitting enough for power. He wasn't driving the ball as much as he should have been. And I remember the conversation that we had with him about how to hit a curveball, and maybe not his mechanics, but how to look for it mentally, and what to do, and how to get into those counts where you actually do look for it, and then which ones do you swing at, So we had this conversation with him, and we worked on it, like, with the curveball machine and all that stuff. And as the season started to progress, he started to figure it out. And then, to your point, Todd, it wasn't myself, or it wasn't Cooch, or it wasn't, Scott Service at the time, who was our farm director, or, but he figured out, he figured it out, and he started hitting hanging breaking balls. And all of a sudden next year he's a big league player.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we were sitting right there in Arkansas, in coach's room, having that conversation, and you can see things mechanically that he was doing wrong, but it was because of how he was approaching it mentally and what his approach was, that all of a sudden, if he just thought a little bit different, then the swing kind of played out a little bit different and put himself in some good categories. Yeah. I mean, that's a really tough spot. We talked about it, throughout most of that year. It's a tough spot for a kid to be in, where you're constantly being compared to the best player in baseball, and just because you happen to get drafted at the same time as him, or was it the year behind him, whatever it was, but you're constantly getting compared to Mike Trout. I mean, nobody can live up to that. And that's really tough. But, to your point, to get him to understand the type of player that he needed to be and what he needed to do, and just go out and beat Randall Grichuk, because that's good enough.
Right.
To get players to do that is tough. So, yeah.
I remember that one. Right there where that's good enough. And I think players, being in the private sector, Mike and I are in, and you're helping players, whether it's through, Mike Micucci baseball, or it's the Scout Hub, and, what I'm doing on the scouting side with providing players opportunities to be scouted by MLB scouts and coaches. You see players in their swing path or their pitching delivery, and it's good enough. Let your maturity build that confidence, the mental game, like you're talking about, where you're learning how to hit that breaking ball. Don't change things. And you see it too often where guys just change their game, even at the big league level. They just change way too often.
Yeah, they do. And I think one of the biggest things with that, Todd, is basically just saying, be who you are and be the best at what you do. I can only talk really about myself, and, I was never a really, really good hitter. I hit enough to get to the big leagues and stay there for a while. But what I did was play defense, and I played it really well, and I understood the game, and I put myself in the position to help the team that way. I think a lot of times if I would have changed what I was trying to do and focused so much on my offensive side of it, I would have probably lost a little bit of my defense. And, as a utility guy, if I couldn't play all over the field and do the things that I needed to do to make the manager be confident in me, I wouldn't have played as long as I did. So I think, to your point, be who you are and figure out who you are and be the best you can at that. And then if you can add to that, great. Take you even a little farther.
We talked about it all the time in the years we were together. Know who you are and then be who you are. The hard part when they're young in the minor leagues, they don't really know who they are at that point. But you see so many times young coaches, organizations, and players focus so much on what their weaknesses are that they forget what their strengths are. And now their strengths aren't strengths anymore, and they're not the player they should be, instead of focusing on your strengths and try and tighten up your weaknesses a little bit. But we've been doing it a long time, Bogey. We've had a ton of conversations. Have you ever seen a guy turn a weakness into a strength?
Yeah, I have, but it always comes from doing what they do best.
Yeah.
Meaning, for example, we had a kid in AA, played second base. He was a left-handed hitter. He was a terrible bunter. but he was just a hooker. I mean, if we were shifting right now, we'd have 8 guys at first base. That's how much he hooked the ball all the time, right? You remember this?
Oh, yeah, I
And
know who you're talking about.
and he couldn't figure out how to bunt. And the point about the bunting part is, with guy on second and nobody out, game situation type of thing, he couldn't move the runner because he was trying to hook everything all the time and wasn't getting the job done. And we finally got him to figure out that, certain situations, this is a good time to bunt, man. Sacrifice, maybe a base hit, move the guy to third. Me as the manager, woo, way to go, man. And he finally figured out, actually, if I work at it and I can figure out the right time to do it, I'm going to get successful at it, and I'm going to end up being a better player. And he did. And
They'll only have 5 guys at first base instead of 8.
Exactly.
And
then maybe if I do hit a ground ball over there, I got a chance. You never know. But for me, it just comes down to Cooch you got to know your limitations. You got to know what you have to work on, because you don't want to make it to the point where that's going to keep you from being successful.
Right.
But don't ever forget what you do well, and continue to work on those good things also.
Yeah.
Great advice.
Yeah, incredible advice. But well, Tim, thank you so much for being on the show. I mean, we really appreciate it. And again, man, congratulations on winning that rock. What an incredible success. And then obviously your career, and I just wish you the best. So it's been fun listening to you talk, and nice meeting you too.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. Yeah, hopefully
get a new recipe for us to try when the season's over.
Don't worry about it. I got a few I can share. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, Tim.
Yep. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, welcome back to All About the Game. What a great show that was with Tim. Tim and I obviously go back a little way, so some very interesting stories about development in there that we got to hear from Tim, both at the minor league and even developing at the major league level. And I think definitely going to want to talk to him again. We could bring Tim back on, talk about a lot of different things. We had a good conversation just about what, different athletic training techniques that are going on in the game today that help athletes develop. We also talked about different strength and conditioning things, as well as nutrition. So a lot of things that we can kind of dive into moving forward that'll really kind of help kids put the whole package together. But that was interesting, very interesting having him on there today.
Yeah, I agree. I loved hearing his story on just him being a coach. I think it's one thing for players to come on and talk about their career, which is obviously, what we want to hear as well. But I really liked how he was getting into the coaching piece with you and just sharing those stories of development and hearing some of the, how players trust their own strengths, and dealing with the weakness part of their game. So really great stuff. So what a cool guy. Thanks for bringing him on, Mike. That was awesome.
Yeah, he was really good. And next time we'll get into some cooking stories. I know him and I have. I'm
going to show some examples, though. I want to see.
I know we've manned the kitchen a little bit together, so we definitely have to fire one of those out there next time.
My wife's full-blood Italian, and so she can cook herself. I'd like to see Kathy Mike show.
Yeah, definitely put our own little menu together.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining us in this episode of All About the Game. I'm Todd Blyleven, my co-host Mike Micucci, and be safe out there. Have a great day.